morning again. I'm back at my local park, Eagle Mountain Park here in Fort Worth, Texas. Once again, the colors are amazing. I've been here maybe 20 minutes wandering around some of the different paths near the entrance, and great colors, but I'm struggling with compositions a little bit. However, I did just find something, let me see if I can point at it, right back here that I think I can work with. There's also another tree just to the left that you can probably see. It's got some nice oranges and then some spindly branches, trunks coming up that are more bare. So first things first, I'm gonna just kind of frame up my composition before I get the tripod set up. Because I was finding the other day, if you watched that video, I was kind of defaulting right to the tripod and getting myself planted with roots, so to speak. So I want to be a little bit more thoughtful in terms of setting up my framing, and once I think I've got something lined up, then I'll get the tripod out, because I was finding I was setting the tripod down and not moving, hence planting roots. So that's where we're at right now. I'm just going to work this scene a little bit, see if I can find a composition that I think will work, and we'll go from there. It's about 40 degrees out right now. It's a little after 7 a.m. Clear blue skies, no clouds whatsoever. It is Monday, so there's a lot of traffic going on the 2-lane highway outside the park. I don't know if you can even hear it or not, but it's loud to me. So yeah, just here again to see what we see, and hopefully we have a little bit more of a fruitful outing than what I had the other day. Yeah, we'll see. So the first thing I'm looking at here is trying to decide, do I want to do a horizontal frame or potentially a vertical or portrait orientation. I think for the composition I've got in mind, probably horizontal, although there's actually a bit of a second composition opportunity here, I think, that I can do portrait-wise. And then if I look at this other composition I had in mind on the left, that would definitely be horizontal, and I think zoomed in fairly well. For instance, right now I'm about 270 millimeter, I would guess, but I do really like that framing here. So I think I'm actually going to take this left-hand shot first, because it's a little bit higher. There's a little bit of sky coming into the top of the frame that I'm going to have to work with, maybe just zoom in a little tighter. But as the sun comes up, I don't want to get too much light on that scene. And I think that right-hand scene will stay out of direct sunlight. They'll both stay out of direct sunlight for a little while here, because I've got some pretty tall trees and a little bit of elevation behind me. But anyways, rather than me babbling on about that, I'm going to grab the tripod and get set up. I do have to be a little careful in framing this left-hand composition. It's this group of orange trees with the bare tree branches up at the top. Depth of field shouldn't be too much of an issue. However, it's either a branch off that same tree or it's a separate tree that does look like it's a little bit closer. So I'm going to have to watch that in terms of depth of field. Again, this is going to be a horizontal, so I'm going to rotate my tripod collar and we'll get set up here. One thing you may notice is I don't have my tripod legs splayed out all the way that they would normally at this height. That is something I've been quote-unquote struggling with more and more of late, is I wish I had more height on my tripod. So that's something I'm starting to consider in terms of my options for upgrading. Mainly looking at, I think, two different choices, either FLM or LEOFOTO. If you've caught eye of this hybrid ball head gear head I've got, that's a LEOFOTO. I've been really, really happy with it. So I've been eyeing their tripods. They're quite affordable. FLM's not too bad either, but anyways, I've got my tripod legs pulled in a little bit, try to get a little bit extra length. I do have a very, very short center column on here. I could deploy if I needed to The main center column, the larger center column, I typically don't use, because then if I want to do a low composition, I can't go as low as I'd like. So what I want is a tripod that would be probably around 6 feet tall to the base of where the head would attach. That way it's about eye level at the base, and then again another, what is that, 6-7 inches or so with the hybrid head I've got here. So anyways, that's why I don't have this as secure as it really should be, but it's workable. Now, the light is very soft and indirect, but polarization is doing a little bit. Actually, let me take a couple frames here so you can see the difference polarization makes on this. Okay, so I just took that without any polarization, so let me grab another frame here with full polarization, and I'll throw those on the screen so you can see the difference between the two. I think for this particular scene, probably gonna do kind of in between. I don't want to cut out all of the glare and texture of light on the leaves, but I do want to pull out a little bit more of that color, avoid some of those specular highlights that might cut the color out, so to speak. But I don't want to cut it out completely. Now I am shooting at f/16. I'm only at 1/4 of a second. The good news is, right now at least, there's basically no wind, which is a big improvement from the other day. Probably once that sun starts coming up, we'll start seeing a little bit of wind start in. So the advantage of getting here early enough to shoot in blue hour before full sunrise, before the sunlight starts streaming into scenes, is I can avoid that wind. And for instance, right now I'm at 0.3 of a second at f/16, and I don't really have any issue with that longer shutter speed. So I'm going to go ahead and click this. And I want to take a look at my depth of field, so I'm going to zoom in and just pan around. Depth of field so far is looking perfect. Everything that I want to be sharp is nice and sharp. Now, I kind of set this up and just fired the shot off, so I want to be deliberate in reviewing my edges in my frame. I'm going to go back to my live view and play with the comp a little bit. And I think, as I'm getting told off by a squirrel, I think I'm going to take this second composition as well. I think I like this better, so I just rotated the frame very slightly towards the right so that the main subject tree is kind of coming in from the right a little bit more, also getting more of the spindly structure of those bare branches through the frame. And again, I'll take a look at my depth of field, but I think we're still good there. We are. I'm liking this frame. I might like this frame better than any of the others I got the other day. So again, just if you're out in the field working, just because you see a composition, you take the shot and you like it, as long as you got the time, you're not, rushing because of light or wind or weather or whatever, take that extra moment and play with the composition, refine the composition a little more to make sure you truly do have the best one. That's what I love about having this geared head as well, as I tend to shoot with the 100 or 400, which means I'm zoomed in really closely a lot of the times. Again, right now I'm just shy of 300 millimeter. If I was just using a regular ball head, it's very hard to get very small, refined movements with a ball head. I've been really, really happy with this, but those gear settings really let you just make little minute adjustments, which when you're at 300-400 millimeters, minute is key, because just the smallest movement can really change your composition. So anyways, I went on a tangent about equipment there, but if you've got the opportunity to get any kind of geared head, if you shoot at a lot of longer focal lengths, definitely recommend it. Even for shorter focal lengths, even on the 24-105, I'd love having this geared head. So again, I think I've got this framed up nicely. I'm happy with that shot. So now I'm going to focus on this right-hand frame. See if I can get lined up a little bit for you, but I've got these more golden leaves here. There's a little bit of a dead branch hanging down on the left that I like. Unfortunately, there's also a bare patch in the foliage kind of near it. I don't think I can get over far enough without these foreground trees getting in the way to kind of have that dead branch backed by the nice green evergreen that's there as well. So I'm going to focus solely on this golden tree. You can see a little bit of the trunk coming straight up the middle, and it's surrounded with this nice yellowish orange and even still a little bit of pale green foliage in there. So let's focus on that one. Now I'm going to go ahead and drop this off of the tripod for a moment. Because again, I don't want to set the tripod down and kind of plant myself in concrete. Now this one, I do think is going to be a portrait. Although the landscape orientation ain't too bad either. Can't quite decide which one I like better, so I think I'm just going to take both. And I can make a decision once I get the files on the computer. All right, so I've already got the camera set up for horizontal shots. I'm just going to take that one first. If I can get this oriented correctly. And now that I'm looking at it on the actual camera, I might be able to get the golden tree with the brick. Photography 101. Make sure your ball head is tight. Good grief, Mike. I think I pooed a little bit. Okay. Anyways, I think I can possibly get both the golden tree with the branch coming up in the middle, surrounded by the nice colorful foliage, and that dead branch off on the left. Unfortunately, there's a bunch of negative space right in the middle with just evergreen. No color, no real branch structure interest or anything. And I'm going to play with the polarization here a little bit. Not sure how I feel about including both in one frame here. I think I'm going to go ahead and take the shot, but I don't think this is going to quite work. What do I do with my remote? I don't think it's going to quite work with the just balance of the frame in general here. Again, I'm still f16, ISO 400, and I'm at 0.4 of a second. I'm a little bright, so let me go to 0.3. Make sure I don't lose some of those color details. I don't think I'm clipping on anything. Nope. So now there is just the slightest little bit of breeze on the tree, but I think, of course, right as I hit the button, got a little bit more movement, but I still think, yeah, we're good. It's very minimal right now. Yeah, looking at this, I don't think including both structures, the golden tree and the bare branch hanging down, I don't think that's working in terms of balance. So I'm going to reorientate. I'm going to move my framing here. Now the question is, how do I want to do this? I think I'm going to put so I've got the center structure of the tree basically on the left third line. Not to be cliche of composing by thirds, but it works for this particular frame. And I'm still shooting horizontally. So I've got that kind of trunk structure coming up, and then the colorful foliage kind of swooping at the top to the right, and then to the left, or from the left to the right as well. So let's make sure we're focused. We are. We're a little dark now, so we're going to go back to 0.5 seconds. Check my histograms. I'm clipping on the red channel, so I'm going to pull this exposure back down to 0.4. And we'll take another shot. Check my histograms again. Still just barely clipping on the red, but again, the histogram readout on the back of the camera is going to be based on JPEG, not RAW. So it should be okay with just a little bit that I'm clipping. My overall histogram looks good. Check depth of field and sharpness. looks good. And I think I'm liking that. I'm actually thinking this one might be a little better if I had a little bit of light on it. But we're a ways off from that. I don't want to camp on this one composition for too long. Now, let's unlock my collar and we'll flip this sucker into the horizontal orientation. And for this, I might actually like this better with the trunk on the right here. Although again, there's a fair bit of negative space in the lower left of the frame where it's just that kind of void of dark evergreen. On one hand, it could work. It looks decent on the back of the camera, but it could be one of those situations where I get it on the computer and I'm not too sure about it. Now, as suspected, I'm getting some wind coming in, so I'm going to bump my ISO up to 800 so that I can keep that shutter speed down. And based on the light meter, I'm actually underexposing it by almost a full stop. But if I look at my histogram readouts, I've got my histogram set up on live view to show me RGB, or red, green, blue histograms. And with these fall colors like this, the red one is the one I'm primarily looking at because that's the one that's most likely going to clip. If I've got my exposure centered on the light meter, it's quite likely pulling in too much data for the reds when I'm clipping the reds, which means I'm going to lose depth of detail in the warmer tones. So being cognizant of that, and that's why I'm a little shy. What am I, about 2/3 of a stop under right now? So let's get this shot. Wind is nice and calm. And again, we'll take a look at sharpness. All looks good there. I do think at least on the camera, I like having that evergreen in the lower left corner. You can't see it on the video because it's too fine in the details, but there are some little spindly little bare branches coming out from the left of the tree as well that is contrasts nicely with that darker evergreen backdrop. So I think that works, but I do want to try this other orientation as well, because also on the right side, there are some bare branches coming out. Again, very small, fine branches you're not going to be able to see in the video detail, but it also provides kind of that extra interest and balance, similar to what we had when the trunk was composed on the right side of the frame. So again, zoomed in, camera is steady. Take my shot, there's no wind. It looks a little bright, but none of my histograms are clipping, so we're good there. So that was taken at 1/6 of a second, f/16, ISO 800. Yeah, I think that's going to be just a matter of getting both of these in Lightroom and taking a look at them. Again, left-hand composition, right-hand composition, and seeing just which one feels better. Starting to see direct sunlight hitting trees off to the right here, so I know time is going to start running short. Up at the very top here, you can see some leaves getting sunlit, full sunlight on them in the background. So I think I'm going to pack up and continue on through. If you watched my last video, I'm going to take that shortcut this time to get to the other meadow quicker and see if I can find some more compositions before the light starts failing me. But so far, I'm feeling pretty good about this morning's outcomes. I've got potentially two primary subjects, maybe 3 compositions that I can work with, 3 or 4 compositions to choose from. So I already feel like I'm off to a more productive start today than what I had the other day. Okay, well, I walked like maybe 200 feet and found another potential composition back here with these nice spindly little dead branches coming off from the color, kind of similar to the other compositions that I've taken this morning, or at least the one composition that I've taken this morning that had the same similar coloring in that, but I do really like the structure of that tree. So what I'm doing right now is, if I can try to keep that tree somewhat in frame, I was further down here and looking at the comp, but there's a little bit of a gap in the evergreen that when I was further down to my left, the bare branches were falling kind of with that bare spot in behind them. So it was losing some of the contrast and creating a lighter patch. Sorry, I'm trying to move around here and also avoid the big pile of deer poop that's right by my feet. But as I move further to my right, or if I was looking myself at the composition, it would be to my left, those bare branches start falling solely against the backdrop of the evergreen. So something to be cognizant of as well is, I only moved maybe 15 feet and it totally changed the quote unquote quality of that composition that I've got in mind here in terms of framing up those bare branches a little bit better. So let me get set up here and see if I can get another shot fired off. The light is definitely starting to move quickly now. If I can lock this in. It's not really cooperating, but anyways, definitely starting to get a lot of direct sunlight in the park on the upper reaches. So I got to stop talking and get moving here. So I'm moving forward a little bit. The ground slopes up ever so slightly, so by moving forward, it's going to help me hopefully frame my composition and avoid some of the taller grasses that are poking up in the foreground. Now I got to find a spot to put my bag. Good Lord, it's not covered in deer poop. And the light is changing quicker and quicker as that sun continues to come up. So I got to move a little quick here. Now I know I said I'm trying to avoid setting up the tripod and growing roots, but at this point, I'm a little bit more concerned with time than anything, and I think I've got a pretty good idea of the composition I want to frame up here. So we're cheating on that regard a little bit. And, oh man, wish I brought my gloves. Now I want to do horizontal frame, so rotate the color. Get this bad boy on the tripod and start getting things framed up. I also have to make a choice. Do I want to include any of the grass in the foreground or not? I'm not opposed to it. Depth of field might be a challenge. We'll take a look at that in a second. Right now I'm dialing in just a little bit of polarization. There's quite a bit of glare, especially on the red leaves, kind of on the center right of that patch of color. So I want to make sure I'm able to get that color pulled into the frame. If I choose to include some of that grass, I want to make sure that I've got enough included throughout the frame so you should be able to see it's sloping downward left to right, which can make the frame feel tilted, which is part of the challenge with this particular foreground. But I don't want to have it fall off completely, partially through the frame. So if that ground is in it, it's in it all the way across. And if it's, I've got more of the grass on the right than on the left, since it's sloping downward. And on the left of the frame, I don't want it to be kind of too narrow of a little strip remaining. So I'm bringing the composition down a little bit with a gear adjustment to make sure I'm covered there. Also, I want to leave some room in case I do some cropping in post. So I don't want to have it too tight. And right now I'm at 100 mil. Might bring that in a little bit. Still not sure how I feel about including the grass, but we're going to take a shot here and see how it works out. I also got to check that depth of field with the grass versus the tree. We might be okay since we're still at about 100 millimeter. Let's just take the shot. And Depth of field actually looks good throughout, so that's good. I kind of figured since I was only at 100 millimeters. Everything looks nice and sharp. Check my histograms. Actually clipping a little bit on the blue, probably because of the grasses. They're coming in pretty cool on the camera. But again, I think with the raw data, it's just a small amount of clipping, so I think I'm fine. I think I'm okay with the grass, but I'm going to take a second tighter shot zoomed in a little bit more. So I'm eliminating that grassy foreground completely and just focusing on the structure of the tree, which is what first called my eye to it in the first place. So let's zoom in. And now I'm going to have to reframe. Ball head is locked down this time. So now I'm at about, probably 175 millimeters. I'm gonna rotate this a bit more. I want to make sure I get the entire spindly structure of those bare branches into the frame. I don't want it cut off on the left, while I'm still making sure I'm getting again, I don't know how much you can see, but you've got spindly branches kind of hanging down as well. So I want to make sure that's included on the right without getting cut off. There's a little bit cut off, but the main structure of it is more than, in the frame, more than enough. Mainly want to make sure I get those left spindly branches in there, and I've got a little bit of color up top to help frame the setup nicely. And we'll play with polarization just a little bit here. That looks good. So we're at f16, ISO 800, 1/6 of a second. Fortunately, the wind is still very calm. A trick I use when I'm using my 100 400 especially, but really even the 24 to 105, especially if it's windy or anything like that, I'll punch in on my digital zoom on the LCD or through the electronic viewfinder, and I'll make sure the frame is stable, especially if I'm hitting the camera, it can sit there and shake for a little bit, especially when I'm all the way out at like 300-400 millimeter. So by doing the digital zoom in, I can make sure I've got a good steady frame, and then using the right remote, get my shot when it's steady. It also lets me see when something's so far off in the distance, if there's any breeze blowing through I need to wait for, anything like that. And this is looking nice. Again, depth of field, not a problem. That looks good. I like that. Comparing it to the wider frame, I'll throw them both up on the screen, but I think comparing the two with the grass and without the grass, I think I like it without the grass better. The grass is, I could burn it down, darken it down in post, but right now, that grass is pretty bright. It kind of pulls the eye a little bit down in that corner, that right corner, as it slopes through the frame. And again, it can kind of make the frame seem off kilter when you've got a slope like this running through. So just gonna have to, again, get them both on the computer and study them a bit. But I think the tighter frame that's just focused on the structure and the color of this tree with the orange and red leaves and then the bare spindly branches, I think that's the key. That's what drew me to the scene. So I'm homing in on that and not worrying about the noise around it, so to speak. But again, you never know. Sometimes you get it on the computer and it looks quite different. The other thing to show you is I've been talking about the histogram and reviewing it. So I've got it set up on my R5 here that by default, my image review is full screen. If I hit info once, it shows me my shot details. So my exposure details, all that jazz. Hit info a second time, it's pulling up my histogram. So you can see I shot this at 100 millimeters, but also that I've got my overall histogram based on just overall luminance of the frame, as well as my RGB that I was talking about. So what I'm looking for is making sure that that red histogram isn't clipping with these fall colors. It can be pretty easy to do so. Let me see if I can find that one where I clipped a little bit. Might be hard to see, but I am clipping on this one on the red channel a fair bit. That spike's going up on the right edge, over half of the height for the red. So that's where, again, you want to be cognizant of that. So there's one, it was a little bit brighter. The overall histogram looks good, but the red's clipping. So I pulled down the exposure just a bit. And again, that red is clipping just a little bit, but that should be fine. Again, this is pulling the histogram details from the JPEG preview as opposed to the actual raw data. And then when I'm on my live view, you can see instead of having the overall histogram, I've got the RGB histogram here. Now, Canon has got an insanely stupid user interface design here where that icon is blocking my red histogram in particular. So that's why, unfortunately, sometimes I just got to take the shot and review the histogram in the image review screen. But this gives me an indicator right off the bat as to whether I'm maybe a little bit overexposed, and especially if I'm including blue sky or anything, I would be looking to make sure that my blue isn't clipping. And again, with these fall colors, I'm going to be trying to home in on that red channel, which, because of Canon, I can't. Without going into the image review, I can't see the right side of it. So anyways, if your camera's got the capability, I definitely recommend, at least on your image review, make sure you've got the ability to pull up the RGB histogram along with your main one, so you can keep tabs on your color channels as well to make sure you're not clipping anything there. All right, so I'm still gonna come over here and use this cut through, but as you can likely tell, the sun is well above the tree line now. So, whoops, as I walk off the trail, I think anything at this point is going to be pretty challenging. So this may turn into Scouting 2.0 in terms of the rest of this morning's outing as I walk through a bunch of spider webs. This part of the park, I'm still in this little meadow area, but once the sun gets up above that tree line, you're kind of hosed in terms of opportunities to find things still in shadow. So we're going to come through here. Sometimes this little cut through trail is a little harder to follow, but we'll come through here, get into what I call the Witch's Meadow, and see if there's still anything in soft enough light over there. And then if that doesn't pan out, I don't think I'm even going to bother going further down, going further down this side of the park. And this is where I can go this way. If you watched the last video, I know it was very lengthy, but at the end I talked about how at the entrance to the park, you can choose to go left or right. I typically go left because I find much more success in that side of the park. This morning I did go right. I didn't go very far right. Oh, there's a nice thorny vine that I just ran into. One moment. Oh, Lord. It's got a hold of my camera. Okay. One of the dangers of Texas hiking, thorns. Now it's on my puffer jacket. Oh, this is going really well. Thank you. No, let go. All right. So I did go to the right this morning, but not very far down. And then from that direction too, you can get through to that first meadow I was in. It kind of links up to both sides of the park. So I might go back that way and just see if the right side's got much in the way of color. The way it's oriented, you can't see further into that right side of the park without just hiking it. So I'm coming up on the Witch's Meadow. Man, there's just some phenomenal color again this year. Okay, I know I said I wasn't gonna photograph compositions I've done before in the video from the other day, but this one's been kind of in my mind for a bit. It's the witch, as you can see somewhere in the frame, probably not pointing anywhere near it, is a little bit backlit, but also the sun is currently, in the video frame, the sun looks like it's way off to the left. But as I'm standing over here, I can get the sun coming right through the witch's overarching branches. And therefore, I think I can get a sun star shot. So I just got to get myself situated correctly and also move quickly because of course the sun is moving. And I don't want to get myself framed up only for the sun to move. And once again, I'm not following my rule of setting up the tripod last because I'm just trying to work quickly here. I think I'm going to do the 24 to 105. Let's just try this out and see. Make sure my image stabilization is off. Now, not surprisingly, I've got a heck of a lot of stuff blown out here because I'm shooting right into the sun. Of course, it is currently in a pretty big gap. So I actually need to bring my tripod down a bit. I'm going to break every tripod rule and shorten my top columns. Come on. Okay, my phone kept wanting to fall over. Hopefully this branch isn't blocking the view too much. In my scramble to just get the light right, I just went in and took a couple frames, which I've got an image review right now. Looking at my histograms, again, not surprisingly, I'm clipping every channel, but that's fine. Most of what is clipping is the sky. And I could end up doing this as a high key edit perhaps. And actually I'm on ISO 1600 right now, so I'm going to bring that down. I don't need to be that high. I'm shooting at about 80 millimeter. Now I did drop this to f22 to try to get a really nice sun star on the frame with the sun coming through. Now, unfortunately, I am getting a lot of flaring. My lens is clean, so it's not due to dust on the lens. It's just because of the way the sun's coming right into the frame. Now, I could counteract that. Let's just try to do a handheld shot here. Well, that made the flaring even worse. Moving off to the side like that. Which is frustrating because I actually really like that composition otherwise, so go figure. So I've got the sun star oriented. Essentially, there's a little branch coming out here that ends or cuts down. So the sun star's oriented right at the tip of that. I think this looks pretty good. So I'll throw the different compositions and frames up on the screen so you can see them. But I'm thinking this worked pretty well, actually. And I avoided the horrible flare. Although I might be able to fix the flare with healing. Because I like the comp and the sun star a little bit better. So anyways. Alrighty, I am indeed back on the right side of the park. Hiked in probably about half a mile at this point. As you can see, it's much more heavily wooded along the trail compared to where I was the other day, for the most part. And that's one of the difficulties with this side of the park is there's very few meadows to work with. It's all trees right up against the trail, so you can't really get any distance and isolation of subjects given the layout. You also might be able to see that there's a lot of low shrubs. A lot of it is thorny vines, similar to what I got stuck on earlier, which hinders one's ability to go through and explore. Let's see, I'm trying to remember. There's this little side path here, but if memory serves me correctly, it just goes down to the lake it doesn't open out at all. Now I could shoot conceivably along the lake a little bit where things are more wide open, shoot across the water, see if there's anything of interest. But it's late enough in the morning now that the light's not going to be any good. So what I'm going to do here is, if I continue on about another half mile, I'll get into a different part of this side or this half of the park that's got, once again, a little bit of a different layout in terms of trees. It's actually kind of similar to what's behind me here, as opposed to over here where it's much scragglier and really low and twisted gnarled trees, a little bit more taller trees, as I was mentioning in the video the other day. That is the area that last year had already gone well past peak fall color, while the rest of the park was at peak. So I'm guessing I'm not going to find much of interest. And you can see here even, like there's a little bit of a meadow, but this is all, drawing a blank on the species of oak, but basically these will stay green. I'm pointing at nothing. These will stay green for quite a while and then just kind of go brown. So just real quickly, this is another great example of the challenges of this entire park, but this side especially, because there are some really cool old, big old oak trees. You can see back there, there's some really cool structure, but there's so much undergrowth, there's not really a clear shot. And if I shoot wide, then inevitably I get a ton of sky, because there's not much else in terms of tall trees around them. Now you'll also notice that this area is largely bare of leaves already. There is yellow scattered throughout, but nothing so far that really looks compositionally of interest. Here's another example of a nice old oak tree that would be pretty awesome to shoot. There's just no good way to frame it. So again, just another example of the challenges shooting in this park. There was a little meadow I stopped or go by just a little ways back that I thought maybe it would have some potential. It's just completely, everything is bare around it. There's not a bit of color or foliage left. So I'm feeling less and less certain that we're going to get anything good here. Okay, I'm at my target destination. It's about what I was expecting, which wasn't much. I'm trying to get in the frame here. I think I've got it right in here. There's always this tree that intrigues me, but getting a composition of it, I have failed every single time. Now, obviously, again, this is not the time from a lighting standpoint to even try. Even early morning, once that sky starts hitting it, or once that sky starts brightening up, it's a really contrasty scene, because this tree is very much in shadows and creates its own shadows pretty heavily. Probably my only shot at this is if I were to get here super early, very early in blue hour, where the exposure of the sky and the landscape would be a little bit more equal. But there's also challenges that there's other trees growing up. I think I'm pointing at them here, kind of within this bigger tree. I love the structure of it so much. Someday I want to figure out how to shoot it. But anyways, like I said, as expected, this area is just nothing special from a photographic standpoint. Now, don't get me wrong, it smells fantastic. There's a lot of evergreen. You get the smell of fallen leaves. I think somebody is maybe burning leaves in the distance somewhere. I'm getting little whiffs of that, which, yeah, I know it's not the best for the environment, but it smells so good. But this whole hike, not just this part of the park, but where I was earlier this morning has just smelled fantastic. I love coming out in the woods just for the smells. So walking along here, this is where I'm getting into that area I was talking about where the tree species and layout is a little bit different. You can see they're all taller and straighter, which, you know, up high is great, but shooting makes that a challenge. So I'm just shooting straight out. There's still a fair bit of undergrowth, not as much as the earlier parts of this side of the trail, but still a lot of stuff getting in the way. And because the trees are so much taller and less twisty, shooting straight out, there's not a whole lot to work with. So at the end of the day, now I know, still a beautiful hike, but the color is better than it was last year when I came here. So just like the other part of the park, it is running late. Okay, had to stop for another plane flying overhead. Lots of really loud jets today. I'm guessing maybe the Joint Naval Reserve Base is running drills. But anyways, the color is, considering I'm here like, I think a week or two after when I came by this area last year when the trees were pretty much brown or bare, still a lot of very bare branches, but there is more yellow left still. So again, the color is just late in general this year, although if I look over that way, what looks yellow on the camera here is actually leaning more towards brown at this point. But again, it's just not much to work with. I have tried in the past to work with, just like the other day, shooting upwards to get kind of those fractal shapes of the trees. But where you've got some of those best shapes, you've also got a lot of lower branches that get in the way. So it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. So I think at this point, I'm just going to hike back to the truck, call it a day, enjoy the smells as I hike, get back home. I got to start printing my folio orders for Look for the Light Volume 2. The pre-order window on that has closed, but I do still have plenty available still for purchase on the limited edition. So if you're interested in that, you can go to my website and learn more. But anyways, I got to get those printed and packaged up in the next couple days to ship out after the prints have had a chance to off-gas. And yeah, I've got a lot on my plate. I've got an ebook I'm working on. I've got all my fall Utah photos I still have to edit. I've got a online course presentation I have to record and plan out before I record. So lots coming ahead, even if I don't get back out to shoot. I've got plenty to keep me occupied. So with all of that said, until next time, as always, take care.